Hello, and welcome to my channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud. This is a little blue book. It happens to be Little Blue Book number 1263, and it is entitled The Serpent's Tooth and Other Stories, written by Clay Fawkes, F-U-L-K-S. And let's start. Let's see, when was this one written? See if it has copyright date. Title page. Yes, copyright 1928 by Haleman Julius Company. Contents: The Serpent's Tooth, written by Clay Fawkes. The Damned Outfit, written by O.W. Coley. And The Fire, written by Sarah Hard, H-A-A-R-D-T. And we'll begin with The Serpent's Tooth. How Stony Point's good people met Satan's invasion. Clay Fawkes. It was the dusk of a still June evening, and the first hesitant notes of the whippoorwill were coming faintly from the edge of the nearby forest, when Sarah Baxter, her long day's work done, relaxed with a sigh of relief in her easy chair in the gathering darkness of her vine-screened porch. Her long bony hands, gnarled with the toil of half a century, lay comfortably folded in her lap. She had been busy since early dawn, bending to tasks which, through a long stretch of years, she had done over and over thousands of times, and she was now fagged almost to exhaustion. But the most exhausting toils and cares, she reflected, had the richest compensations. It was when she was weary and heavy-laden that she felt drawn closest to the Lord. Thus for years, every evening at this hour, when the weather was mild, she had sat in lonely contemplation and prayer. It was the one sacred, secret hour in every 24, when she communed with her Maker and offered up whispered prayers for Millie. An inscrutable providence had vouchsafed Sarah only a vicarious motherhood, but she had tried meekly and patiently to gather fragmentary maternal satisfactions from the relationship. The duties of this office had been from the first little less exacting than her duties to her God, with only a trace of Pharisaianism, and with not a shadow of yielding to the dangerous innovations of the rising generation. She had met with stern devotion and jealous vigilance her duties both to her God and her dead sister's only child. Not for long years had Sarah's flesh wrestled with her spirit, causing her to cherish a sorrow vain, or to murmur at the cross she had been given to bear. Miss Sarah, as she was known to the little southern village where she lived in the ancestral home, had had no fears of living alone. While Millie was gone to college, Sarah was 57 and afraid of nothing in the universe but her God. She went nowhere but to church and the post office, and lived well on her own resources. Her low white house was surrounded by 5 fertile acres, and her Jersey cows, white leghorn hens, orchard and garden under her capable, industrious hands, yielded her a comfortable income. She had lived here all her life, but never alone until Millie had gone away the fall before. Sarah was 10 and the elder of 2 daughters when her mother died, leaving to her childish hands the unending work of a household, and to her watchful care the toddling infant sister. Her father had never remarried, but had kept close at home until his death several years later. The younger sister, Polly, had grown up a strong, active, beautiful tomboy who, by some strange perversion of heart, had steadfastly refused to worry about anything under the sun or to accept the salvation made possible by the atoning sacrifice of the Savior. Even when death himself had stalked into the doorway, a too indulgent father, the village believed, had spoiled her despite all the prayers and persistent protests of Sarah. Then one sunny afternoon in October, as Sarah sat dutifully preparing her Sunday school lesson for the next day, pretty Polly Baxter, pink and 17, who had never been out of her native county, prinked and preened one fateful hour and ran away to get married to the eloquent young Barker for a wagon circus. 2 years later, the poor girl, desperately ill, knocking on her father's door one stormy night, and died of childbirth before sunrise. Family tragedies aside, Sarah's entire life had been barren and uneventful. To her, the great event had never happened. Tall, severe, angular, and unlovely, she had always lived without a lover unless it was some nebulous ideal, some fleeting phantom lover of the imagination, and her affection for Mildred, her sole surviving relative, was chilled by a grim, unbending determination not to spoil the child by sparing the rod or by any soft, sentimental cuddling. Yet she had watched the child narrowly and constantly, bringing her up on the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Mildred was early taught every golden text, every hymn, every commandment. As soon as she had reached the first stage of accountability, Alright, that doesn't make sense. There. Yep. First stage of accountability. Sarah, assisted by her pastor, prayed over the frightened child every evening until she was converted and baptized into the church. Under the strict supervision of her aunt, Mildred had grown to adolescence in an innocent apparently as a flower. Then, when she entered high school, she began to question her aunt concerning subjects which set the good spinster to blushing and praying more devoutly than ever. Sarah should have been thus warned, and when Mildred had finished high school, set her to the safer drudgery of the household, or secured her a position as saleslady in one of the village stores. But the girl had insisted on going to college, and her aunt, a virtual recluse who knew nothing of the dangers of higher education, yielded to her niece's implorations. Accordingly, Mildred had been sent to a small Baptist college in a distant part of the state, and beyond the frequent letters such as girls usually write to their parents, Sarah knew nothing of what was going on in the girl's mind. Tomorrow Mildred would be returning home for the summer, and Sarah, who had fixed a habit of ascertaining exactly what was secured by every dollar spent, now determined to find out quietly, but definitely as possible, just what returns were to be forthcoming for the $400 which the girl's first year in college had cost. Such an outlay of money justified the expectation that not only would her earning power be much increased, but her value as an elderly lady's companion greatly enhanced. Moreover, she should now take a leading part in Sunday school, prayer meetings, and church work generally. Then there was the BYPU, which might reasonably look to her for renewed inspiration and leadership. Sarah was not quite sure of the scriptural authority for BYPUs, but neither was such authority for Sunday schools, according to her incomplete researches, quite clear. There were the women's clubs of the town, worldly affairs to be sure, but active membership in them certainly added to one's standing in the community. Mildred might attract the serious attention of the young cashier of the People's Bank, so much sought after by the best young people of the town. There were various ways in which the value of a year in college might be tested. Drowsiness at length befogging these meditations, Sarah arose and shambled stiffly to her bed, knelt for one final word of prayer, and retired for the night. Chapter 2. At 10 the next morning, amid hand-wavings and shouts of welcome from numerous friends, Mildred, flushed with joy, arrived at the post office. Sarah, accepting her cool, undemonstrative way, the resounding smack which her niece planted on her bony cheek with easy grace, Mildred moved from one friend to another in affectionate girlish greeting. But they were hurried greetings, for her aunt never lingered anywhere a moment longer than necessity required. Was already on her way home. "My trunk, Mama, my trunk!" shouted the girl. "Oh, yes," returned Sarah with a wry smile. "I never travel and never think of trunks." "Well, it contains my latest fiancé's latest photograph," announced Millie humorously. "Your what?" exclaimed Sarah. "All my things, Mama, you know," the girl answered soberly. The mail carrier had removed the trunk to the platform of the post office. "I'll get your trunk up to the house, Millie, in just a jiffy," the loud, cheery voice belonged to Hercules Hutto, who had just walked up. "Why, thanks, Hercules," acknowledged Mildred, as she placed her hand in the large extended paw. Then, continuing cheerily, "I'll have to run along with Mama. I think she has a roast in the oven, and you must stay for dinner with us." Hercules had been Mildred's most loyal follower in the grammar grades a few years before, but the poor fellow could not keep pace with her any further. Now, at 20, she was already wearing the championship belt as village loafer, and yet perhaps Hercules was the most popular young man in the village, for he had not been wholly idle, but had gathered in other championships as well. Standing 6 feet in his socks and weighing 190 pounds, he could outbox, outwrestle, and outrun any other athlete in Perry County. But no one had ever charged Hercules with being a bully. On the contrary, he had always enjoyed an unrivaled reputation for fairness in all manner of combats, and after every frequent fight, he would hasten to make friends with his meanest adversaries. He consistently declined to engage in any gainful occupation, but had done most of the labor of digging every grave made in the village churchyard within the past 5 years, and shed big, round tears at every funeral. He never missed a dog fight, and always took sides with the underdog. Never having had any use for draymen, Hercules simply shouldered the big trunk and struck out, whistling to overtake Millie. "I am anxious for you to get acquainted with our new pastor, Millie," remarked Sarah, who regarded every man of God as set apart and incomparably superior to all others. "Brother Cotton," she continued, "may not be very highly educated, but he is certainly filled with the Holy Spirit. He preached the powerfulest sermon last Sunday night I think I ever heard. I sent word this morning to him and Sister Cotton to come over and take supper with us tonight." Millie's brow involuntarily puckered. "I wish you hadn't done it, Mama," she replied. "I wanted to be with just you in the old house until I could catch my breath. Besides, I am tired of preachers at this particular time. I have been listening to their state platitudes for the past 9 months, and throughout the commencement exercises especially, I was bored almost to distraction by their pleticine and piety and intolerable presumptions. My nerves are all unstrung." Sarah stopped dead still in her tracks. "What are you fussing about, Millie?" demanded Hercules, overtaking the women. "Oh, Mama had invited company for dinner this evening." I said supper, Mildred, Sarah corrected her. Well, supper then, Millie went on. And I wanted a breath of freedom and utter disalienable. Then suddenly remembering that she was talking Greek to Hercules, she added, I wanted to put on an old loose frock and whistle and dance about the old place. I want to cut up, Hercules. I want to whoop and yell. That's the time, Millie. You just cut up and it will make a man of you, said Hercules. Shut your mouths, snapped Sarah, suddenly scandalized, then softening. Millie, you are making me dizzy with your big words. You must have picked up lots of slang at college. I thought it was a Christian institution, but begging your pardon, ma'am, corrected Millie. I do not use slang, not even college slang. I despise it. Well, something seems to have happened to you, returned Sarah sadly, then walked on toward the house. Hercules placed the big trunk where Millie wanted it and remained for dinner, smacking his lips loudly over the first dainty dish he had tasted in a long time, without once suspecting that his presence was keeping Miss Sarah from speaking plainly of the ugly fear in her mind. He kept up a constant exchange of good-humored raillery with Millie. But in the garden that afternoon, Sarah said, Millie, I don't understand just what you meant this morning by flouting God's ministers as you did. You realize, don't you, that these servants of Christ are working and praying day and night to keep precious souls from going down to a devil's hell? Ah, Mama, you shouldn't take me so seriously, returned Millie, really much averse to giving anyone, and more particularly her aunt, pain. Moreover, she understood how utterly impossible it would be to bring the stern Christian woman to see her new point of view. Well then, concluded Sarah depreciatingly, you shouldn't use such shocking language. Aren't you glad I have come home, Mamma? Coaxed Millie in her most engaging tone. Of course I am, daughter. You know I have been lonely ever since you went away. I guess you got to hear many fine sermons in the college chapel, Sarah inquired. Oh yes, Millie answered good-humoredly, willing to try to make amends for what she had said about preachers 2 hours before. But I have always doubted, Sarah went on, that those highly educated ministers preaching the true word so faithfully as the lowlier ministers, the few I have ever heard don't preach with as much Christian zeal. Oh, they aren't much better or worse than the village pastors, Millie stated. Some of them do try to impress their congregation with their superior learning. But superior learning is not worth anything in the sight of God, Sarah declared solemnly. No, Millie agreed, and then contrived as easily as possible to shift the conversation to other topics, to inquiries about the neighbors. That evening Brother Cotton, Sister Cotton, and the 5 little Cottons came in early for supper. The little Cottons, forced to live on half fare, except when they dined away from home, were hungry as trout, and it was with difficulty that their embarrassed mother could restrain them until the blessing was asked. The Reverend Cotton, a huge, pugilistic fellow with a voice like a bull's, showered down the words of the blessing with such vibrant force that the dishes rattled on the table, and Mildred escaped the disgrace of giggling only by a hair's breadth. Well, young lady, I guess you think you're mighty smart now, began his reverend, addressing Mildred in an obvious air of rude joviality. Well, certainly, replied Mildred, without a hint of a smile. Why shouldn't I? Haven't I been an inmate of a Baptist seminary for 9 long months? I thought you went to college, Mildred, interposed Sarah. Well, Mama, that's what we girls called the school, Mildred explained laughingly. Most of our colleges are becoming seminaries of infidelity, observed his reverend sadly. To what fraternity did you belong? Demanded the pastor suddenly. Oh, I didn't join any of them, replied Mildred. The bare-headed boys tried to organize a sorority, and I meant to join that, but the dean interfered and the plan was dropped. And I think we'll stop there as the first video for the Serpent's Tooth, written by Clay Fawkes. and other stories.